Thank you very much, Jim. I think frogs are a very interesting analogy because as I was driving around at the weekend, observing the rather high price of petrol and diesel following on from recent events in the Middle East. And if we think back to the fuel tax protests way back when and the price of petrol per litre then, slowly but surely we see changes happening, but still people are driving around as much as they did before. And I think that's one of the big challenges that really faces policymakers is how do you actually get to a situation that people aren't like frogs in a gradually warming pan such that actually they don't change their behaviour. But anyhow, let me talk very briefly about what it is that business is actually looking for. Obviously, there's the PWC report which we published last year, which was interviews with 700 companies in 15 countries around the world. Now very much updated, supplemented by the Green Mondays report that was published on Friday. A fascinating similarity between the two reports, an extraordinary level of coherence. Obviously Green Mondays is a UK-based survey, but the results almost mirrored what was in Appetite for Change. One of the very interesting things in Appetite for Change was the fact that almost universally different countries had very similar views to the type of policy or the themes underlying the policy that they wanted, irrespective of what country you're resident in, and generally irrespective of what sort of industry that you were in. So what are the things that people are really after? Well, Jim's already talked about the fact that people want to comply with the rules. If you're a policymaker and you have 90-odd% of businesses saying that they want to comply with rules, then that's a pretty good thing because it means that whatever rules you put in, generally people will follow because the consequences of not following them are not good for them. Businesses are very keen for governments to take the lead. One of those reasons is that if governments take the lead, then there's a better chance of there being a level playing field from an international perspective. Obviously in Australia, the government there is very much taking a lead at the moment, but businesses there are starting to feel very affected about international competitiveness because they're seeing the possibility that there won't be a level playing field. So the view of business is directly opposed with the comments from some of the senior UN officials made around the time of Cancun last year, where they were urging businesses to take the lead. But businesses see that if they take the lead without government taking the lead, they could be disadvantaging themselves competitively in the marketplace. Businesses very much believe in emissions targets. They very much believe that if you actually want to get emissions down at a countrywide level, whether because you want to do it for unilateral purposes or you want to do it to comply with your domestic your international obligations, then if you set an emissions cap at an individual country level, then you will find that people will follow it and that behaviour will change and then the overall policy objective will be met. But there's very much a view that at the moment international governments are not joined up with each other, and even more so, there's a feeling that domestic departments and domestic agencies are less joined up than even international governments. So quite a damning message there really for policymakers about the need to make sure that you have your domestic policy joined up so that you can then make sure that you've got a coherent and consistent position when you're trying to look at international policy. Consistency is absolutely the key. If we think that we want people to invest several billions in low carbon technology to move us to a low carbon economy, low carbon power generation, carbon capture and storage, those types of things, these projects are very long-term projects, very expensive and with a very large amount of risk attached to them. You have to have a very stable domestic policy and stable international policy so that businesses feel comfortable knowing that they've got a range in which on a post-tax basis they will get the return that they need to justify the investment they're going to make. Because businesses have limited amounts of capital, they have to choose where to invest it, and it has to be attractive enough for them to decide to invest in low carbon. And this consistency is absolutely key. One of the things that we're already starting to see is a lot more debate again around, for example, feed-in tariffs in the UK, where there's an urgent review being undertaken to determine whether or not the type of people who are applying for or who are investing in technology that qualifies for feed-in tariffs, is that the type of business that government wanted to actually benefit from the feed-in tariffs? My view on that is a relatively simple one, which is what is the objective you're trying to achieve? If it is really a shift to low carbon, If feed-in tariffs is the proposed policy tool, if as a result of that you end up with large businesses or larger scale projects than you anticipated, then actually surely that's a good thing because it's that shift towards low carbon you're looking for. It's irrelevant who's doing it. The opportunity is there for all. Simplicity is another very important and key message as well. And if we look at the current carbon price support mechanism that's being proposed by the Treasury, we then start to look at potentially 4+ layers of carbon tax in the UK. We have emissions trading scheme, we have what I'll call old climate change levy, we have the carbon reduction commitment, and now we potentially have new climate change levy, or CCL2 as it's known, and on top of that we could then end up with a carbon capture and storage levy as well. So a lot of complication out there, and I think there's very much a need for simplification so people understand what it is that they're supposed to be doing, what it is the policy that's being supported. In summary, businesses generally are looking to engage with governments, but they're looking to engage around making sure that everybody agrees what the policy objective is, that the right policy tools are used to implement that policy, and that there's effective introduction of those policy tools, so that ultimately you do actually end up achieving the policy that you want. And if we're going to have a shift to low carbon economy, then actually we really do need those policy tools to be effective, because otherwise the consequences, as we all know, are potentially very serious. Thank you.
Sorry.